morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I thought we'd talk about a woman's hormonal cycle in relationship to anxiety. I know that after I finally got my anxiety under control, I would still notice that there were times during my cycle when I would have anxiety and it was very confusing to me. For me, I finally I figured out it was the 10th day of my cycle, which is kind of unusual, but I had very long cycles, so I'm not exactly the average. I'm not the 28-day person, or I wasn't. I've been in menopause or many years now, but anyway, back in the day, it would flare up and I could track it. So I ran across a little article that kind of summarized everything, and I'm going to post it. It should pop up after I finish with this little video. It's scheduled to anyway, and you can read it because you can track back and see what you can see. In the Break Free program, we have a chapter on women's hormones, and also there are charts so you can keep track of what's happening in your cycle, so you can figure out if your hormones are affecting it. For me, I realized that I was being affected on the 10th day, and what I did was I just didn't schedule that day with things that would be troubling for me. And I also was very gentle on myself and forgiving, and realized that it was just a hormonal quirk that was going on, and that probably the next day or two would be gone. And then when you get to menopause, then it'll go away completely. So there's one good thing to look forward to. Okay, so I'm going to kind of look at the summary that you're going to see, and just pick out some points. It's great. You can refer back to it, and I think it'll help you. And if you're on the Break Free program, just be sure and do your cycles and log in and make your notations and see if you can figure out what's going on with you. Okay, so in the first week of the cycle, your estrogen hits rock bottom, and then it starts to climb. And if you are sensitive to estrogen, you could experience a temporary bout of anxiety. So you just want to keep that in mind. Apparently, caffeine makes it much worse. So we know that caffeine makes anxiety worse in general, but they've specifically called it out for this one period of your cycle. Week 2 is supposed to be at the end of that week, you're supposed to ovulate. Now, that's a standard 28-day cycle, and I'm going to tell you that is not true for everyone. Actually, I'll tell you a secret. I got pregnant on the 28th day of my cycle when I was in college. My husband and I have been married 9 months, and I thought I was perfectly safe. Well, wrong. So what you want to do is, if you have any kind of regular cycle, when you're young, it's oftentimes not regular. It just isn't. So let's say your cycle is 30 days or 35 or 40 or whatever. Count backwards from the day that you start and go backwards, and you'll figure out, you count back 14 days, because there are certain, at that 14-day marker, when you do ovulate, then it sets up a trend for things to happen. So pretty much everybody ovulates 14 days prior to the beginning of menstruation. Now, when you're young and a teenager and haven't had children, you can ovulate more than once, and it can be really odd, and that's why teenagers get pregnant more easily. Well, that's not the only reason, but it throws them off sometimes when they think they have things under control. Okay, so if you have a normal cycle in week 2, day 8 through 14, let's see, the estrogen is going to rise until it peaks. Testosterone rises at the end and it peaks. So, we have testosterone. Women have testosterone. You don't want to be all testosterone. You don't want to be all estrogen. You want to kind of have this nice curve. Well, that's not exactly true. There's a graph that we see when we're doing studies, and there's estrogen and testosterone. You want men to be have their curve more on the end of testosterone, and you want women to have this bell curve more. They have, because nobody's exactly the same. Well, I don't know if nobody is, because there's millions and millions of people, but you don't want to be on the far end of estrogen. You don't want to be on the far end of testosterone, because that is really rough. You want to try to get kind of in the middle of those bell curves and hope that that you're one of those lucky ones that gets to be there. Okay, so we're in week 2. We're at the end, which is day 14 for some people. For other people like me, it would have been like day 20, so or 19, something like that. You get a lot more physical and mental energy during the second week. Your high estrogen at that time can trigger anxiety in some people, and that is because this hormone prompts more brain arousal, making you more easily pushed into an antsy territory, as the article is saying. So you can worry more, sleep less, blah, blah, blah. You can feel more on edge. But if that's your issue. So then we go into week 3, which begins after ovulation. And they're saying this period lasts 8 days. Now, this is pretty standard. This would be day 15 to day 22 in a 28-day cycle. But if you have a longer cycle or a shorter cycle, that's a little different. Okay, so progesterone rises. Estrogen and testosterone drop off for the first half of the week. Then estrogen rises again. So if you're sensitive to plunging estrogen, you may notice anxiety symptoms. Estrogen, and in week 3 it says, as estrogen descends, bringing down mood stabilizing serotonin in the brain. So if you don't have the feel-good serotonin, that can cause problems. But they said chances are the rising, this anxiety response is going to be blunted by rising progesterone. Now, this is assuming you don't get pregnant. If you get pregnant, that's all bets are off. Totally different hormones take over at day 14 or at day ovulation. So the rising progesterone, which has a sedating effect, so a calming effect. So during these days, you'll likely experience a lot more soothing calm than in the first part of your cycle. That's because estrogen levels go back up, boosting serotonin back up with it, and it's paired with calming progesterone, making you mellow. And let me see. Okay, so I'm going to another page because I printed this off. I thought it was really nice. It says there's an exception to week 3 mellowness, and this I find is really interesting, because one of the big things that we teach people in the Break Free program is how to balance their blood sugar. And for some reason, during this time, if you go without food too long, it's more, many people are more sensitive to drops in their blood sugar. Isn't that interesting? It's a side effect of the high levels of progesterone. So we teach people how to balance their blood sugar, the type of foods to use, how much to eat, how often to eat. And what was interesting in this article is it says that if you eat and get your blood sugars raised up, you should feel calmer within just a few minutes. Now, that's true about blood sugar, period. When you, not high blood sugar, but when you get your blood sugar level, you will feel better, and it's much less much less likely to have anxiety. And we've talked about that before, how the chemistry of low blood sugar, the chemistry your body uses to raise blood sugar up is the same chemistry that causes a panic attack. So that's why it's so likely that you would have anxiety if your blood sugar drops. Okay, week 4 is estrogen and progesterone plunge, so that the uterine wall that's built up to take care of the baby sloughs off. So it just plunges and cuts off the blood supply, and then it just starts sloughing everything off. During that week, anxiety can happen because of this plunging estrogen, and it also brings down the mood stabilizing serotonin as it descends, like we were talking about before. And insomnia can set in during this time. And I think all of you know that when you don't get enough sleep, it's much harder to handle life. And it changes things in the brain, and it says, and I love this, it says it ratchets up anticipatory anxiety, so we're much more likely to worry. So I hope that was interesting for you girls out there. Men have hormonal shifts too, and men go into menopause. Isn't that interesting? But that's not for today. Oh, there was something else I wanted to mention, that our trace minerals have a lot to do with our all our hormones, and keeping them nice and sweet and balanced. But that, again, we'll talk about another day. That's one of the reasons we included in the Break Free program. It's really important. There's many trace minerals, and it's hard to get in our food nowadays because they only put a couple of minerals back in the soil, those that make your fruits, vegetables, and stuff really pretty and store ready, rather than what your body is asking for. Oh, well, let me see. There's a question. Can kids get anxiety from a pregnant mother after giving birth with having an anxiety mother? Well, I don't know if that's true. I had anxiety a couple of years after my first one was born, and it was really interesting. He was a little bitty guy, but he spoke very early. And it was interesting because I would say, oh, I'm so nervous to do this, or I'm so nervous to do that. And I noticed that he picked up and used that word as fear. So he knew exactly what was going on inside of me, even though I was using a different word. So they certainly can pick things up. My second child, I had anxiety before, during, and after, terribly, and he did turn out to have anxiety, but I don't think that's why, except for all the nutritional depletion. I think the first child, I just ate everything, and I got everything, and my cravings were right, and I actually came out better after pregnancy. After the second one, I didn't want to eat. I lost a lot of weight. I wasn't feeling well. I was very stressed. Of course, now I had 2 children. Joshua had immature digestion. So I think he was born with the genetics because he's passed it on to one of his 2 children. And obviously he wasn't the mother. So I believe it came from his genetics, not from the pregnant mother. So I am guessing that it's passed on in ways to your children, but not the ways that you're thinking, that they're picking up behaviors, or that maybe you're not as good of a mother as you think you should be. I think it's more genetics and more nutritional deficiencies and imbalances of your body systems that are likely to cause the child to have it, than the fact that you're having anxiety symptoms around them. But of course, people pick up behaviors. That's true, but it's interesting. In my family, we have 3 and 3 in a family of 6, raised with the same people, same mother, same father, and 3 have no anxiety. 1 is especially dynamic and out there, and 3 that have anxiety. So we just happen to have the luck of the draw. Our parents were the same, and my mother didn't have anxiety, but her sister had anxiety. So my mother was a very, very calm mother. She was a very calm person her whole entire life. So I really question that I got my anxiety from her actions. She meditated, she did yoga, nothing upset her. She never yelled. My father did all that stuff. So anyway, I hope that helps. The answer is, I think you pass it on, but I don't think it's the same way you think. And I wouldn't worry too much about your child catching your anxiety. It's probably already programmed into them. And then your foods and the things that happen to you are what decide that it comes out in your life. I will talk to you guys later, and you can check that article. It's going to pop up anytime now. Oh, it should have popped up. And you can check it out and see if your symptoms fall in, and it can explain. It gives you permission, I think, to let yourself relax a little bit during those times and just not blame yourself so much. Talk to you soon. Bye.